Hello, I am Pastor Diana Belker, and I serve at St. John's United Methodist Church in Rohnert Park. Today's message reflects on scripture from 2 Samuel chapter 21 and is part of our Unraveled worship series. Let's jump right in together. In late summer 2015, I moved from the panhandle of Florida to New York City to begin my seminary education. The headlines about another storm did not shake my attention from school and the big city. But then a classmate who grew up on the Gulf Coast, whose family still lived there and had been affected by Hurricane Katrina, walked into a meeting and couldn't stop crying. She unraveled right in front of us all. Her public grief caught my attention and my heart. I quickly started paying more attention and asking lots and lots of questions. It turned out that I was not the only person in the seminary who was inspired to act, nor was I the only one with ties to the Gulf Coast. We began to talk, pray, and plan, as well as cry and soothe one another. That is how I became an organizer and leader of around 50 seminary students, social work students, and independent media to go together to the Gulf Coast in January of 2016. We spent 2 weeks listening to people tell their stories of grief, listening to their outrage at the lack of timely assistance, and yes, listening to more grief. We listened to people who had lost everything and were now forced to resettle 3 states away. We listened as we helped a family sort through the rubble on their property and accepted their hospitality in their FEMA trailer. We listened to a developer talk about how he would rebuild and make it so much better for the wealthy and for the business owners. And we heard stories from people whose loved ones were stuck in jail cells as they filled with water. That trip changed my life. The people and their stories opened my heart to new realities around race, poverty, and public policy that I, as a young, educated, somewhat worldly white woman, had not encountered before. Today's scripture is one that I would bet most of us have not encountered. At least, I'd bet most of us are not familiar with it. It is not in our 3-year lectionary rotation that tries to bring us highlights from throughout the Bible. It's a weird, difficult, and somewhat gruesome story with much to say. It's from the second book of Samuel, and now we're going back to the days of Israelite kings, the King Saul and King David. You may recall that King Saul had concubines, lots of them. One was named Rizpah. King Saul had committed some atrocities and tried to kill off the Gibeonite people, who were supposed to be protected by a treaty with Israel. Flash forward, and King David is now on the throne, King Saul is dead, and the nation is in the midst of a 3-year-long famine. King David asks God how to end the famine. God suggests that David might make restitution with the Gibeonite people. So King David approached the Gibeonite people for a truce and a peace. They asked the king for 7 of the old king, King Saul's heirs, so that they may dishonor King Saul and wipe out some of his seed by hanging his sons and not allowing them proper burial. King David agrees and chooses 7 of Saul's male heirs from 2 lower-class women and hands them over to be murdered by the Gibeonites. Rizpah, old King Saul's concubine, is mother to 2 out of 7 of the slain men. Now here is where the story really takes a turn. Rizpah does something counterintuitive to most of us. She does not take her grief inside her home. She takes it outside. Literally, she makes her grief very public. Public grief was not really expressed back then, nor is it really expressed or wanted these days. Let's look at verse 10 together. Then Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, from the beginning of harvest until rain fell on them from the heavens. She did not allow the birds of the air to come on the bodies by day, or the wild animals by night. Rizpah unravels her grievances publicly. There is power in her defiance, and we would not know of her story except that her public grief was noticed. It makes it into the scripture. It touched, perhaps unraveled, another's soul. Sometimes, frequently even, when we really allow another's grief to touch our hearts, there is a messy, beautiful, difficult way that it can unravel our soul. Our assumptions may be challenged, our walls of certainty crash down, and our worldviews can even shift as someone else's truth unravels our heart. This is holy work. It is a blessing for those who are able to listen, as well as hopefully for those who are finally heard. They say every grief needs 1,000 tellings, and I would say it's at least that amount. Grief, publicly expressed, is public for a reason. There are reasons a person's grief is expressed beyond their immediate community. Rizpah's story is tragic on many levels and fronts. She experiences injustice after injustice at the hands of the state and culture. This tragic story tells us something about one mother's love and her fierce protection of her sons, their bodies, and their reputations. I can only imagine her grief, her outrage, and her determination. Yet even this week, I hear Rizpah's story in the story and voice of yet another mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, a Black woman whose son, Ahmaud Arbery, was killed while he was out on a jog in his own neighborhood. 2 white men have been charged with his murder. Sadly, this is not the first such video I have seen. It is one in a long string of public outcries for racial justice in our land. As I watch the video of this mother's pain and outrage, and as I hear the statistics of how Black and brown bodies are disproportionately ill and dying from COVID-19, I and we have a choice. Do I flip the channel or keep scrolling through the posts on my phone? Or do I sit with her and allow her pain to possibly unravel my own assumptions and consider how I might respond with empathy, compassion, and in pursuit of justice? King David hears of what Rizpah did. He is so moved that he gathers the bones of King Saul, Saul's son Jonathan, and all 7 of the sons executed by the Gibeonites, and buries them all together in their ancestral family's tomb. He gives the entire family the burials they deserved. Out of Rizpah's public expression of grief, the king responds with compassion and justice. Out of the unraveling around us today, we too have the opportunity to create stronger ties to those of us who are hurting and in need by listening deeply and responding with compassion as we work towards greater justice for all. For God is at work, changing our hearts and helping us know each other's stories. Together, may we pay attention, listen deeply, and respond to build God's commonwealth of justice and peace together for all of God's people. So may it be. Amen.